Hey, I'm Coach T, and this marks the next in the series of Python quick code videos in which I am wearing my blue workout shirt. I don't know why this has become my uniform, but I'm on kind of a hot streak today, and I want to make a video about return values in Python, which is really, really powerful. And I actually just had a conversation with my brother who's working on Python as well, and this came up. Now, in his case, he understood what it was, but I realized I had been taking for granted how returns work. So I thought this is a great place now that we're beginning to use functions and your procedural programming is coming along, that we should probably pause and talk about the return keyword, which is very, very useful in making your methods really, really, really powerful tools in your programming. So I struggled a little bit with return when I was first learning to program in Python because I had never used anything quite like it. And it's a common feature. In fact, I think it's ubiquitous across programming languages. But if you know me, you know that Python was really my first programming language where I started to get it and started to be able to build things on my own. And I had to learn everything that I know now in C Sharp and in the little bit of Java that I know, a little bit of JavaScript that I know, and of course Python. I had to learn everything first in Python. So I remember being confused, and I remember a lot of the rough and raw spots where I had to stumble towards proficiency largely through trial and error. So these videos, these quick code videos, are designed for other adult learners like myself, maybe adolescents who don't have school resources or a teacher to teach them how to code, to help you get up to speed and learning and building cool things as quickly and as respectfully as possible. So if you like that kind of thing, consider subscribing to my channel, the Coach T channel. Drop a comment if you've got something you want to add or you've got a tip for another learner. I always appreciate that. But with that said, let's talk about the return method. So the big idea, the big takeaway here is that the return allows us to give a value back to the program. When a method does something on the side, Python's top-down execution pauses and it goes off to look for the method over on the side. And then it works through that method top-down, right? When it hits the end of the method, it then returns back to the main body of the execution, if we want to think about it spatially, and then continues. What doesn't happen on its own necessarily is that any methods or any values in the methods, they may not be returned back to the main thing. So if I'm computing in a method, I need a way to return that side value, which is being treated like a temporary variable, back over into the main body of my program. And I have a very simple demonstration of that kind of complicated topic right here for you. So I'm going to declare my method, or I'm going to define my method, which takes in one parameter, a number, and then number is going to be plus equal to 1. And I'm going to return that number. So here's what's going to happen. Down here, I'm going to assign a value of 5 to the number. And then I'm going to call my method. I'm going to pass in the value of number 5, and I'm going to print it. But notice, this won't work yet, because even though we are returning number, it's not being reassigned. See how that works? Let's see it in practice. So here's the number 5, right? So what happened? It should be 6, right? If we start with 5 and then we add plus 1 to it and then we return it, you would think that this number is the same as this number, but it's not. The reason for that is because when we move off to the side to do a computation in a method, this is being treated like a temporary variable. So we need to reassign the value using the return number. So here's how we do it. We would say number equals my method. So now we're going to reassign the value of the number variable by calling the method on number, which should add 1 to it, and then return this new temporary variable and assign it to the variable number outside of the method. So let's run it. I should get 6. And there it is. So one of the things that we do need to keep in mind is that Variables declared inside of methods are temporary variables unless we declare them as a global number. Okay, and this can be a problem because anything can now access it. Let me see. In order to get rid of this, I'm going to call this number one, and number is assigned before global declaration. Where is it assigned before global declaration? Okay, so I cleaned up my code a little bit to allow me to use the global number declaration. And what you'll notice now is I no longer have a parameter on the definition of my method. I declare global number, and then I say that global number's value is 1. This global keyword allows me to do things with this number outside of the method. It no longer acts like a temporary variable because I can actually use it in the main body of the method once it's defined and declared, right? So I'm defining it and declaring it here. If I were to move this print number, this is going to cause some issues because there's nothing there yet. It should anyway. Yeah, so there's a name error. Number is not defined. So let's delete that, and we'll put the definition of my method back. So now when I call my method, it sets up a global number. Number is now 1, and when I return the number, this doesn't even matter. I don't even need the return. Now I'll get 1, right? Now you might go, well, how is this related to returns? Well, sometimes new learners will learn about this return and the global because they're often together in curriculums, and they'll go, well, why would I ever need the return? The problem here is that this global number can now be manipulated anywhere. So I can have number plus equals 1, and when I print this number off, I should get 2. Yeah, so even though this is it's within the method, now the entire program has access to that global number. So I would recommend staying away from those and instead using your return statements. It's just more secure that way. So number plus equals 1, and now you can see we haven't defined it outside the scope of this variable. So we're going to say number equals 5, right? And now if we print, we call my method is going to add plus 1 to number, but it's not returning a value. So we need to return number, and we need to make sure that we assign this value like that. So now when we come back, we should get, let's add 10 to it, just so it's a little bit different than before. We should get 15 because we're starting with 5. We're calling my method on number. In my method, it's going to plus equal 10, and then it will return the new number by printing it. So we should get 15. And there it is. There's our 15. So there's our return. Now, so far we've only worked with integers. We're at 8 minutes. I think we have enough time to do this with a string. So what if we do my method name, and we do name plus equals, because we can concatenate at gmail.com. And we set name as Coach T. Name equals my method name. Those need to be the same, right? This needs to be the same. And we will print off the name. And we also need to return name. So now we have name Coach T. We're going to call my method on the name variable to concatenate the Gmail at gmail.com, and it's going to return, and we should print it. And this should work to give us an email. Boom, there it is. So we can return string types, we can return int types. It doesn't really matter as long as the type that we're returning is what we're looking for. If it's the wrong type, it might throw issues if we're computing on it later on, but that's a more advanced topic. We can also just use return as a kind of kick out keyword. So sometimes you might see that, but it doesn't really need to be there. It's unnecessary. It isn't necessary because when you hit the end of your method, it will return on its own. But if I do this, if I just return, I get a none, which is not what we want. because we're returning a none, right? So be very careful about that. If I just return the method on my name, but I don't assign a value, then I should get Coach T, right? That's it, because the name has no longer been reassigned here. What's happening is I'm returning a none value. So be very careful with the return keyword that way. I've seen it where it doesn't matter, like the function is kind of ancillary. I would stay away from it though, because it's likely to throw you off. So don't do that. That's bad practice. I've seen it. It's not good practice. It can work in the right scenario, like if you're overriding a variable in here. I wanted to show you one more way to define a method right here. Oops. So here's another way. We could return, I'm going to have to rebuild this very quickly, but if we have number equals 5, and then we assign number equals my method 1, we pass in the number variable, and then we print number again. So we're back to that very simple algorithm again. Just take a look at this return statement. In this one, I am not overriding the number variable separately. I'm just returning it plus 1. So what should happen here? Well, I assign the value to 5. I call my method 1 with number. I pass it in, I get plus 1. If this works, I should get a 6. And there it is. So this is a simpler way to do the same thing as the initial my method, right, where I had assigned number plus equals 1, then return number. Sometimes you don't need to do that. And if you ever do want clarification, you can do it like that as well if you want to be very clear about what you're returning. So those are a couple different ways to use return values. They're very powerful. They allow your functions to really deeply interact with the rest of your program, and I would recommend that you go play with them. So we're at 12 minutes. We just ticked over it. I'm going to end the video there and encourage you to go practice, go put 45, 50 minutes into practicing, writing some simple methods, and then returning values from them to compute downstream in your programs, and try to get 1% better today. That's the goal, right? 1% better every day compounds on itself so quickly. So with that said, I'm Coach T. I'm happy to have showed you the return values today. If you like this kind of head first, one topic at a time, adult learner friendly content, consider subscribing to the channel because I've got lots of videos on Python coming. I believe at the same time we're going to be looking at Affinity Publisher, and eventually we'll start looking at some HTML and CSS as well. So with that said, I'm Coach T, and I will see you in the next video.